SHOO-FLY Girl by LOIS LENSKI. Chapter 1. The Familiar Path. "Och, don't pull so," cried Susanna. "Stand still once," said her older sister. "Stop wiggling." The big kitchen was a busy place. The children were getting up. It was still dark outside, so the lamp over the table was lit. Bib and Beck, the two big girls, whose real names were Barbara and Rebecca, were already dressed. Beck and the boys had gone outside with their father and mother to milk the cows. The twins sat half-dressed on the floor playing. Henry, 5, snatched his hat and ran out too. Sammy, 3, still in bed, began to cry. Bib dipped the comb into the basin. She parted Susanna's hair and began to wet it. She made neat twists of each ear over each ear and pulled them back. "Not so tight, not so tight," cried Susanna. Bib made 2 long braids in the back, coiled them in a knot, and pinned it with hairpins. "There now, Susie," she said, "you're done." "Why do you make it so fierce tight?" asked Susanna. "I can't even turn my head, it hurts terrible." But Bib paid no attention. "Who's next? Pumpkin or Puddin'?" The twins, aged 7, looked just alike. They had the same blue eyes, the same brown hair, the same pointed chins and fat cheeks. They were the same height too. Their real names, Anna and Ada, were seldom used. When they were fat babies, Uncle Dave had called them Pumpkin and Puddin', and the names had stuck. The Fishers loved nicknames. Bib, who was 14, had plenty to do. She was frying mush for breakfast, trying to comb the twins' hair and pack the school lunches all at once. "Put in a piece of SHOO-FLY pie for me," said Susanna. "Och, now, all you want is SHOO-FLY pie," said Bib. "We've only got one, and it's not enough for breakfast. Here, put it on the table. I'll bake some more today, after school, and you can help me." She handed a large pie with a crumby top to her sister. "Pumpkin and Puddin', get the table set," called Bib. "Hurry a little or we'll all be late for school." The little girls took knives, forks, and plates to the long table by the window. They hopped up and down on the long benches. They were very light on their bare feet. They set 11 places. There were 9 children, and Dat and Ma'am. It was getting light now, and the others came in. Ma'am put out the light in the gas lamp as the morning sun streamed in through the east window. Then she brought Sammy from his bed. Everybody washed at the basin and sat down. All but Susanna. She was not there. They never started a meal until all were there. "Where's that girl?" asked Ma'am. "Beck, Bib, where is she?" "Susie, Susie," Bib called. The door of the kettle house opened, and Susanna came running. She slid into place on the girl's bench. "Move over," she said, licking her lips. "Gimme room, Pumpkin." "Silence," said Dat, hands on laps. "Fold your hands." They bowed their heads. Ma'am and Dat moved their lips and prayed silently, eyes closed. The children prayed too, without a sound. Then they reached for food and ate. They spread pork pudding on fried mush and ate it. They had coffee soup, coffee poured over bread cubes. All but Susanna, who licked her lips again. She was not hungry. She hoped no one would notice. "Clean your plates," said Dat. Nobody talked. They were too hungry, too busy eating. Susanna slid her slice of mush onto Reuben's plate. He wolfed it down. Nobody saw. "Heck, no pie this morning," cried Jonas. Jonas was the oldest, 15. He liked to think himself a man just because he was through school. He had finished the 8th grade and did not have to go any more. "Who's hiding the SHOO-FLY pie this morning?" asked Dat. Breakfast was not breakfast without it. "Why, Susanna," said Bib, "I gave it to you to put on the table." She looked, but there was no pie in sight. "What did you do with it?" Susanna jumped up, ready to be off. Then she knew there was no escape. She must stay at the table until everyone had finished eating, and they had prayed again. She sat down. Ma'am repeated the question. "What did you do with the pie, Susie?" Susanna hesitated, then she wailed, "Do we have to have pie every day for breakfast?" "That's not the point," said Ma'am. "What did you do with it?" Susanna hung her head. They were all looking at her now. "I hid it." "Hid it? Where?" asked Mamma. "In the kettle house," said Susanna. "Go get it then," said Ma'am. "Why on earth did you hide it?" "Oh dear, Ma'am always had to know everything." Because I dropped it," said Susanna. She might as well tell it all. There could never be any secrets in this house. "I dropped it and smashed it, and then, she might as well confess. It wasn't any good for anything, so I picked it up." "And then what?" asked Dat. He spoke in a gentle voice, not scolding at all. "Then I just ate it up." The words sounded frightening in the silence. Susanna looked at Ma'am, lips set tight and black, frown getting blacker. She was in for it now. She'd get a terrible licking. Eating a whole pie, who ever heard of such a thing? But thunder and lightning did not strike. Out of the silence came a cackle of laughter. It was Rags, Reuben by name, whose laugh was like a hen cackling. Then Dat began to roar, and all the others joined in. Susanna looked up and saw a broad smile on her mother's face. She was safe, no yardstick this time. "So that's why you weren't hungry for breakfast," said Ma'am. "You were full of SHOO-FLY pie." They laughed and laughed. Would they never get done laughing? What was so funny about eating pie? No licking, thought Susanna, but this might be worse. They would tease her to death. "Hi, SHOO-FLY," cried Jonas, the biggest tease of all. "Been shooing any flies lately?" "She's got her tummy full of SHOO-FLY," cried Rags. They pointed their fingers, and Susie wept. She had earned a permanent nickname. From this time on, her name was seldom Susanna or even Susie. It was SHOO-FLY. Bib did not forget. Bib never forgot anything. That day after school, she saw to it that Susanna made a SHOO-FLY pie, her first. It was Friday, baking day. Ma'am had been baking bread all day, long in the big oven in the kettle house. Bib had to bake the cakes and pies. They were getting ready for Saturday. They would sell them at the pie stand on the highway. Susanna Fisher, formerly called Susie and now SHOO-FLY, was a little Amish girl. She lived on a farm in Lancaster County, Pennsylvania. Her parents, grandparents, and all her ancestors had been Amish since they came to America from Switzerland in the early 1700s. They were a strict religious sect who lived as close to the teachings of the Bible as they knew how. They kept themselves apart from the world and its ways. They had a way of life all their own. The Amish children were used to hard work. As soon as they could walk, they had chores of their own to do. Susanna had made schnitz or dried apple pies before. They were easy. A SHOO-FLY pie was different and took longer. Bib told her just how to do it, how to mix brown sugar, flour, and butter to make the crumbs, how to mix molasses with hot water and soda and pour it in a pastry shell. Then put the crumby mixture on top and bake it. Why do they call it SHOO-FLY pie? Asked Susanna. Bib shook her head. Don't ask me, she said. Bib was always serious. That's its name. We've always called it that. It was the same answer Susanna always got. Why do we wear black bonnets? We've always done so. Why do we wear aprons? We've always done so. Why do we have church in a house and not in a church? Why do we do things this way? We've always done it this way. Our grandparents and great-grandparents did it this way, so we do it too. We are Amish. We do not change. Susanna had heard it over and over. She would hear it all her life. She would say it to her children. But why do they call it SHOO-FLY pie? She asked again. I know, because it's so good the flies like it, and you have to shoo them away. Bib looked at her smiling. You ought to know how good it is, she said. You ate a whole pie. On Saturday, Bib had to stay home and do the Saturday cleaning. Besides, Bib liked housework and Beck didn't. So Beck hitched the horse Skipper to the carriage and packed the bread, cakes, and pies in the back. Mam told Susanna she could go along, but she did not want to go. I want to stay here, she said. I want to see Grossmama and Aunt Susanna. I want to help them. They need me. She tried to think of excuses, but the truth was she did not like to go away at all. Out on the highway, where all the cars were, she was frightened. She was scared of strangers, too. No telling what they might do or say. It was bad enough to have to go to school. Home was the best place, the safest place to be, but Susanna had to obey. Like every Amish child, she had to obey without question. She put on her long purple school dress and black apron. She tied her purple bonnet under her chin. She heard her mother talking to Rebecca, talking about her. It will soon be Susanna's turn. She is old enough, she can make change. She can do the selling from now on, once she learns how. Make change, do the selling, talk to strangers. Was Mam crazy? What was she thinking of? Get a move on, SHOO-FLY, Mam's waiting. Called Rags outside holding the horse. Susanna climbed into the buggy. She sat down in the back next to the boxes of baked goods. She was hemmed in by the darkness. She could not see a thing. The buggy had covered top and sides, and the curtain was down at the back. It was like a little house. There was one little window to peek out of. It was a good place to hide. It would be a good place to lie down and sleep if they'd only let her. Skipper's hoofs made a steady clop-clopping down the lane and out on the road. The buggy wheels squeaked and crunched on the loose gravel. Mam and Beck talked in low voices. After a while, they made a turn and started again on the paved road. Soon a loud roar, like that of a lion, was heard, and a big automobile came bearing down on them. Susanna could hear it, even if she could not see it. It was a big monster going to eat them. She held her breath, but it went on by and left her to her dreams. Other cars came and went, but she did not notice them. All too soon they came to a stop. Everybody piled out at the pie stand. It was like a little table with a roof on top. That and Uncle Chris had made it. Beck unhitched Skipper and backed the buggy up behind. She and Mam took the baked goods and vegetables out. Also jars of Mam's apple and pear butter, cherry and plum jam. They set them on the stand. Beck fixed them to look nice. She and Mam talked about prices. Cars began to stop. The people in them were not Amish. They did not speak Dutch, so the Amish people called them English, because they all spoke English. Susanna spoke English too at school. She could read and write and spell it, but at home she spoke in Dutch. These people who spoke English all the time were queer. They wore fancy clothes in gay patterns and bright colors. When Susanna asked about it, her mother said, "They are not like us. We are plain people. We are Amish," the same answer over and over again. Each time a car stopped, Susanna hid. Sometimes she climbed in her house in the buggy. Sometimes she had only time to duck under the counter so people would not see her. Ma'am had to explain. "She's terrible bashful, this one." When they were alone, Ma'am told her, "You must learn how to sell the pie and cake." "Och no," the thought terrified her. "I can't." Ma'am told her the prices. Cake, $1.25, corn 50 cents a dozen, bread 25 cents, pie 85 cents. Susanna repeated the prices after her. She looked at Beck's black pocketbook on a long shoulder strap. It might be fun to wear it. It might be fun after all to jingle the coins and make change. "Stand here," said Ma'am. "Don't you go hide. You might." "As well get used to strangers. They won't bite you. Stand here and shoo the flies away." She gave her a piece of paper. Just then a man came up. He got out of the largest black car Susanna had ever seen. The man had no beard, and wore no hat. How funny he looked. He was fat and had a gold pin in his bright red tie. He had a big cigar in his mouth and kept puffing. Ma'am was fixing things in the buggy. She turned her back to him. For an Amish girl, Beck was very bold. Ma'am had told her how to talk to tourists. "Where are you from, mister?" she asked. "Massachusetts," the man said. "You're a long way from home," said Beck. That was what you said to all of them. The man looked at Beck. He saw her bonnet and cape and apron. "You're Amish," he said. "What's your name?" "Rebecca Fisher," said Beck in a low voice. "What's yours?" "I'm not telling," said the man. Then he saw Susanna shooing the flies away. "What's your name?" he asked. Susanna ducked behind Beck and did not answer. "Cat's got your tongue," teased the man. Susanna peeked around and stuck out her tongue at him. There, that would stop him. Why should he know her name? He was a stranger. "Och, Susie," scolded Beck under her breath, "don't act so. He won't buy anything." "You don't need to tell me your name," said the man. "I know it already. You're SHOO-FLY girl, because you shoo the flies away." How did he know? Could he read people's minds? Did he know she ate a whole SHOO-FLY pie just yesterday? How did he ever guess her nickname? "SHOO-FLY girl," said the man again. Beck laughed. Ma'am heard and laughed too. Susanna hated him. She'd never be Susanna or Susie any more. She'd always be SHOO-FLY. SHOO-FLY made the SHOO-FLY pie. Beck lifted it up. "That's for sure." "She did," he said. "That little thing. No bigger than a minute. Can she bake pies? I'll take it." He paid the money, took the pie, and went back to his car. After they were sold out, Ma'am and Beck and SHOO-FLY drove home again. Everything looked just the same. The big bank, barn, the windmill, the double house, the 4 big Martin boxes on tall poles in the barnyard. Why couldn't the Martins stay longer? Susanna liked to watch them swoop across the sky and come back down to their houses. She looked at her own house, the house so plain, no curtains, with green shades pulled down halfway. Neat and clean, the house called home. It was noon, and Bib had dinner ready. After dinner, SHOO-FLY skipped out. Saturday, no school, a time to be free and do as you please. Ma'am had sewing to do. That would keep her indoors. The sewing for 9 children, making all their clothes, was never done. Bib and Beck put on their oldest clothes and went out to the tobacco field. "I don't want to work, do you?" said SHOO-FLY to Rags. "No," said Rags, "but we'll have to." He had his rattiest clothes on, ready for whatever might come. He did not have as many ideas for escaping work as SHOO-FLY did. "I'll tell you what," said SHOO-FLY. "We'll rub our arms with poison ivy, then we won't have to help." "Okay," said Rags. He cackled with glee. "Where will we find some?" SHOO-FLY led the way to a shady place down by the creek. She picked bunches of three-pointed leaves, crushed them between stones, and rubbed the paste on Rag's arm and her own. It colored them nice and green. She rubbed it on their bare legs and feet too. "Now we are safe," she said. "But won't it hurt?" asked Rags. "I had it once and it itched me terrible." "It goes away soon," said SHOO-FLY. "Now we can go out and watch the others work." SHOO-FLY liked to be out where the others were. She did not want to miss anything. It was a wonderful September day, crisp and cool but sunny. She went tearing across to the tobacco field. She was so thin and her feet were so light, they hardly touched the ground. Rags came too, but more slowly. He liked to take his time. Then came Henry and Sammy, and behind them Pretzel, barking loudly. Pretzel, a nondescript dog, got his name because he liked to eat pretzels. Henry, only 5, was not called Hayfork for nothing. He could handle a man's hayfork like a man. His blonde bobbed hair made a halo around his smiling face and under the broad brim of his black felt hat. He always wore his hat outdoors. The children ran to the field and stopped. The tobacco had been cut and the men were working at the far end of the 5-acre field. Dat was not a farmer like Uncle Chris. He had a carriage shop and Uncle Chris farmed the farm. But today Dat was out helping. Beck and Bib were helping too. The tobacco had to be cut and hung up in the shed and barn to dry before frost. Everybody was working fast. The stalks that stood so strong and tall now lay on the ground. The workers speared them 5 stalks to a lath. The girls wore old gray aprons up to their necks. They had red kerchiefs tied over their hair. "We'd better not go too close," said Rags. "Hi, you kids, come over here and get to work," called Bib. "I told you so," said Rags. Bib called again. They went up closer, but not too close. "We can't work," said SHOO-FLY. "We've got poison ivy. Our arms and legs are sore. They itch terrible." She showed Bib her arms, but Bib just laughed. "Another one of your tricks," she said, but she left them alone. "Let's go play on the wagon," said Hayfork. They climbed on the tobacco wagon and helped little Sammy up. They jumped down from the wagon and climbed up again. They jumped up and down. It was fun. Pretzel barked badly. Then Beck called, "Come here, SHOO-FLY, and get to work. We are loading now, and you can help." Dat came up and said, "Come, girl, we need all the help we can get." "I told you so," said Rags. Poison ivy or no poison ivy, SHOO-FLY had to obey. She picked up a lathe and speared 5 tobacco plants on it. The loaded lathe was heavy, but she lifted it up to the wagon. Hayfork helped her. "I'm as strong as a man," he bragged. Then he and SHOO-FLY began to load the girls' lathes on the wagon. It made good teamwork, but they soon grew tired. SHOO-FLY whispered in Hayfork's ear. They had worked long enough. His smile beamed approval. The next minute they both jumped down from the wagon and went running across the field. Sammy tagged behind. Rags kept right on working. "Let's go to the carriage shop," said SHOO-FLY. Hayfork nodded. "And see Jonas," he said. Uncle Chris was Dat's brother. He and Aunt Emma lived out by the road near the carriage shop. Their children were still babies. Dat made and repaired Amish carriages and buggies. Jonas helped in the shop or on the farm wherever needed. The shop was always full of all kinds of buggies, old, new, broken down, or half finished. It was a good place to play. Jonas was there today, mixing paint. Dat's helper, old Ephraim Esh, was inside working at the forge. "Och, see Cousin Eli's pony cart," cried SHOO-FLY. Hayfork and SHOO-FLY stared. The new cart stood outside in the sun. It was beautiful, shiny black with red trim. It had lamps on the sides, electric, fed from batteries under the seat. Jonas came out and showed them everything. "It's just finished," he said. "Watch out for wet paint." "Och, Jonas," cried SHOO-FLY. "Such a cart for." "Too good for that little spoiled brat Eli," said Jonas. "Eli gets what he wants," said Hayfork. At 5, Henry was wise beyond his years. Eli was their cousin, Uncle Dave's older son. Eli had a brown and white pony called Buster. Now Eli was getting a new pony cart. Uncle Dave had ordered it from Dat. "Give us a ride in it, Jonas," begged Hayfork, starting to pick up the shafts. "Be a pony and pull us." "Drop it," cried Jonas. "The paint's not dry." Hayfork jumped back. Across the road from Uncle Chris's house and the shop stood another farmhouse. A large truck pulled out of its lane and went rattling down the road. The house had been empty for some time. "New people just moved in," said Jonas, looking up. "Somebody we know?" asked SHOO-FLY. "No," said Jonas. "They're English." "Oh," said SHOO-FLY, disappointed. She saw the door open and several children came out. "There's a girl," she said. "There's a boy about my age and some little ones," said Jonas. "Where they from?" asked SHOO-FLY. "I don't know," said Jonas. The new children were curious. They came out their lane and walked along the road. They came closer and closer to the carriage shop, as if half afraid. They came as close as they dared. They did not speak. SHOO-FLY and her brothers watched them come. The girl was about SHOO-FLY's age, 10 or so, the others younger. They looked at the pony cart. They looked at SHOO-FLY and her brothers. Jonas and Hayfork and SHOO-FLY began to talk in Pennsylvania Dutch. Then the girl spoke. "What's that lingo you're speaking? What are you talking about?" She could not understand Dutch. No one answered. She turned to her little sister and said, "Listen to their funny talk." Her little brother had darted into the shop. "Where's my brother?" the girl called. "Where's Robert?" SHOO-FLY flew with her into the shop. There was Robert with little Sammy. They had found an open can of black grease. They had smeared it all over their faces and clothes. They were black and sticky from head to foot. "Oh, oh," cried the girl, "look at Robert." SHOO-FLY knew just what to do. She found some lava soap that Dat and Jonas used. She washed the grease off the boys' hands and faces, but she could not get it off their clothes. The strange girl took her brother and sister and went home. She did not say anything. "They are mad at us," said SHOO-FLY. "Who cares?" laughed Jonas. It was on the way home that Jonas found the crow. A flock of crows was circling around a tree, cawing loudly. Then they took wing and darted low across the field. The boys began throwing stones at them. Suddenly one dropped to the ground. "Och, you killed it," cried SHOO-FLY. Hayfork picked the crow up and gave it to Jonas. "Is it dead, Jonas?" asked SHOO-FLY. "No," said Jonas, "only stunned. It's not hurt at all. There's not a drop of blood." "There, it's opening its eyes," said SHOO-FLY. "It's alive." "It's a young crow, about half grown," said Jonas. "Give it to me," said the girl. Jonas and Hayfork went running ahead across the field. SHOO-FLY cuddled the crow in her apron. "I'll tame it," she said. "I'll have a pet all my own." She walked slowly, and the world was filled with the song of birds, the smell of the good earth, and the warm glow of the setting sun. Chapter 2. A Step to One Side. Nobody liked the crow but SHOO-FLY. The more the others hated it, the more she loved it. The first day she fed it bread and milk. She spooned food and water into its bill. She made a straw bed in a little chicken pen for it. The front was made of wire, so the bird could not get out. Each day the crow grew stronger. Soon it began to know her and to make noises. When she let it out, the little boys and the twins teased it and chased it. Pumpkin pulled a feather out, and the crow pecked her. Puddin' squeezed it hard, and it bit her. So they soon learned to let it alone. SHOO-FLY took it out each day and put it back in its pen at night. It was a great comfort to her. It was wonderful to have something that nobody else wanted. This was an important thing to learn in a large family. Now Jonas had something new to tease her about. Whenever he saw the crow, he shouted, "Hi, SHOO-FLY! Come, shoo this old black thief away." SHOO-FLY teased Jonas too. "What's that black fuzz on your chin, Jonas? Are you growing a beard so you can go courting?" But Jonas always had an answer. "When I grow up," he said, "I'm going to wear neckties and buttons, cut my hair short, and shave off my beard." It was a daring threat, and SHOO-FLY was shocked. Amish men did not wear neckties and had hooks and eyes on their outer clothes in place of buttons. They all had beards and wore their hair loose and full. "You gonna be English?" cried SHOO-FLY. Jonas only laughed. The next day SHOO-FLY saw the children again at school. Just before the last bell rang, their mother drove up in a big green car, and they jumped out. Their mother talked to Miss Weber, then drove away. SHOO-FLY and Reuben and the twins went to Meadowbrook School. It had one room and 6 grades. Most of the children were Amish, but not all. Beck and Bib went to a small junior high for Amish children. SHOO-FLY liked her teacher, even if she wasn't Amish. Miss Weber's hair hung in soft waves to her shoulders. Her cheeks were pink, and she wore pretty silk dresses. At school, SHOO-FLY was still Susanna. Miss Weber did not like nicknames. When school took up, all the children came running in pell-mell and took their seats. There, in the empty seat beside Susanna, sat the new girl, Betty Ferguson. Miss Weber said her name was. She was in the 4th grade too. Susanna paid no attention to her until recess, when Betty smiled and put her arm around Susanna. "I didn't know you could speak English," said Betty. "Why, sure," said Susanna. "Why not?" "You'll be my girlfriend, won't you?" asked Betty. The others were calling. Susanna ran to the cupboard and got ball and bat and baseball gloves. She ran out and started a ball game in the high grass. All the Amish girls were good ball players. The new children stood and watched. Susanna loved to play ball. She bossed the other children around, even the English boys. In the middle of the game, a gray car drove up and stopped. The children looked, then went on with the game. A man got out with a large black box and started fussing. "It's a camera," Amos Zook said, just loud enough for all to hear. Amos was the son of the Amish bishop in the district, so the children listened. The game broke up. The children huddled together, heads turned, a whisper or two, then they scattered like dry leaves in a gusty wind. One minute they were there, and the next minute, when the man had his camera all set and looked up, they were gone. There was nothing to take a picture of. Susanna ran the fastest. She took the twins by the hand and dragged them inside the school. Miss Weber came to see. SHOO-FLY said, "Photographs are wicked." We all ran. He was a tourist. Miss Weber smiled. She understood. But what did they run for? There was that new girl again, wanting to know everything. "Photographs are wicked," said SHOO-FLY. "It says so in the Bible." "Oh," said Betty, "does it?" After the man left, the boys began playing horse, with binders twine for harness. They drove each other madly about, stamping and prancing. Then the bell rang, and it was time to go in. The children lined up at the iron pump to wash. Almas, Zook, Janesh, and Reuben pumped. The children washed their hands and drank from cupped fingers. They ran indoors, panting. That day was a happy one for Susanna, because Miss Weber gave her a new storybook to take home. She looked at the title, Rebecca of Sunnybrook Farm. Rebecca. It must be about an Amish girl. There were many Amish Rebeccas. She patted the book lovingly. The new girl looked at it too. "That book's no good," she said. "It's stupid. Why don't you get a mystery book? Or a horse book? I like horse books. I just love horses." It was time to go. 3 little Amish girls took brooms, dustpans, and dust cloths to clean the schoolroom. Susanna stepped on a chair at the back of the room. She got the twins' bonnets down from the shelf and her own. She looked at the initials inside to get the right ones. She got Reuben's hat down too. The boys ran for their homemade scooters. Quickly, Reuben took off shoes and stockings and hung them across the scooter handle. He set his lunchbox at the base, and with the other boys went dashing off, coat-tails flying and black felt hats tipped on backs of their heads. The girls were soon left far behind. "Go ahead," Susanna told her little sisters. "Go ahead with the other girls. I'm not in a hurry today." They started down the road, a colorful group of bonneted and aproned little girls, wearing dark bonnets, sweaters, and shawls. A few had black shoes and stockings, but most were barefoot. Susanna brought up the rear. "I hope that new girl won't come and talk to me," she said to herself. Looking back, she saw Betty Ferguson still in the schoolroom, talking to Miss Weber. "Teacher's pet," she said aloud. SHOO-FLY walked slowly, reading her book. It was not about an Amish girl after all, but oh, it was good, good, good. How would she ever find time to read it? Once home, there were all those chores waiting. Nothing but work, work, work. No time to read at all. Mam and Dat thought books were a waste of time, so her nose dipped lower and lower, and her steps grew slower and slower. Better read while she had the chance. Suddenly she bumped into something. She looked up and found herself in the ditch, with her nose against a tree. Oh dear, did anybody see her? They would say she was verhoodelt. Back in the road, a sharp honk made her jump to one side. It was that new girl's mother heading for the school. She saw the Amish girls ahead, huddled in a group. She closed her book and ran ahead to join them. They had stopped at a telephone pole. This was something new to them, as none of the Amish farms had telephones. A new line had just been put into the Ferguson's house. SHOO-FLY knew all about it. A telephone was something you talked into. You talked to people far away. The talk went over the telephone wires. If you put your ear up close to the pole, you could hear what the people were saying. The Amish girls listened one by one, but they all shook their heads. "We can't make out what they are saying." "Here, let me once." SHOO-FLY did everything with vigor. She pushed the other girls away, shoved her bonnets back, and put her ear close to the pole. "They're talking in Greek," she announced, her eyes open wide. "No, it's French, I think. Wait a minute, it sounds like Italian. They say there's a bad snowstorm over there, and everybody is snowed under, and an avalanche is sliding down the mountain, and going to bury a whole town full of people." Her eyes gleamed as the story got bigger and bigger. "I don't believe a word of it," snapped Katie Zook. You're making all that up. Yes, well, SHOO-FLY went on, it could be any language at all. Miss Weber said we've got Greeks and French and Italians and Polish and all kinds of people in our country. The whole world is not all just Pennsylvania Dutch like you, Katie Zook. But Katie was far on down the road, not listening at all. Just then a car came speeding up. It was the big green one again. Miss Ferguson had picked up Betty and her little brother and sister at school and was taking them home. The car stopped beside the group of girls. "Susanna, would you like a ride home?" asked Miss Ferguson. She opened the car door and Betty begged her to get in. The temptation was too great to be resisted. Katie Zook was not asked to ride, only Susanna Fisher. I'll show her, thought SHOO-FLY. The next minute she was in the car, sitting on the shiny, soft green cushion beside Betty. Before Miss Ferguson started on, SHOO-FLY heard the twins crying and the taunts of the other girls. "Susanna wants to be English. I'll tell your ma'am. You'll get a licking." But she held up her head in pride. She was the only one asked to ride. It was SHOO-FLY's first ride in an automobile. The car slid along so nice and smooth and even. There were no bumps at all. Everything went by so fast. The trees, the fences, the corn in the fields, a house or two, she could hardly see them. Betty kept on talking, but she did not hear. Then all at once she was frightened. The car went fast and kept on going faster. Miss Ferguson wasn't looking at the road. She kept turning around and talking to the girls in the back seat. And there ahead, out from a side lane, came an Amish buggy. The car almost hit it. SHOO-FLY trembled in fright. Why, it was her own lane, and that was Grossmama in her buggy, driving her horse Sonny Boy. SHOO-FLY gasped. Her face went white. The car came near to hitting Grossmama. The danger was over now. The car had passed the buggy safely. SHOO-FLY had waved weakly, but Grossmama did not see her. Grossmama did not look at people riding in cars. Then Miss Ferguson slowed down. "I went past your lane," she said. "I'll have to turn around." "We'll go in. I want to meet your mother." SHOO-FLY could not answer. She could not seem to find words. Ma'am was in the house yard taking down the clothes. She had washed that morning. She had to wash 3 times a week. Somebody had let the geese out. There were 30 of them. They were supposed to stay in their own fenced field. Now they were all over the yard, cackling and making a mess on the cement sidewalk. Ma'am was waiting for the children to come home to pen them up again. The place looked terrible. Miss Ferguson stopped in the barnyard beside the row of martin box poles. Ma'am came out to meet the car. She had her white prayer covering on, tied in a bow hanging below her chin. But her dress and apron were not clean. She probably thought it was an egg customer. What she saw surprised her. "You must be Miss Fisher," said Miss Ferguson, brightly. "I'm your new neighbor, Dolly Ferguson." Politely, Ma'am shook her hand. "Pleased to meet you, Miss Ferguson." The air was filled with ice. "I brought your little girl home from school," said Miss Ferguson, "in my car." "I see you did." Ma'am's mouth was a thin line. Her face froze. SHOO-FLY climbed out. Ma'am looked down at her daughter. "Susanna rode home in your car." "Yes, she hitchhiked with me," said Miss Ferguson with a laugh. "Is that something terrible?" Ma'am looked at Susanna again. "I thought she knew better," she said slowly. Then to Miss Ferguson, "She's young yet, but she'll learn." "Learn what?" asked Miss Ferguson, baffled. "Not to ride in cars," said Ma'am, quietly and with pride. "It is not our way. We do not ride in cars. We are Amish." "Oh, I'm sorry," said Miss Ferguson. "Is it wicked?" "It is not necessary," said Ma'am. "We ride in cars only in case of emergency. Please do not pick her up again. Susanna has 2 good legs. She can walk." Coldly, Miss Ferguson turned away. How could she ever be friends with these queer people when you try to do them a kindness? SHOO-FLY walked in the house slowly, hugging her new book in her arms. Reuben and the twins came home, then the older girls. They all made a dash for the big pretzel can in the kitchen. They filled their mouths with salty pretzels and all talked at once in English. Ma'am came in frowning. She heard their English talk. "We are Dutch," she said. "We don't speak English here." The talk simmered down into the soft tones of Pennsylvania Dutch. SHOO-FLY grabbed a handful of pretzels and stuffed them into the secret pocket under her apron. She took another handful and stuffed them into her mouth. Ma'am looked so cross. SHOO-FLY was afraid to say a word. She slipped out the side door when no one was looking. She would go and see Grossmama. Grossmama was a good friend in time of need. Grossmama and Aunt Susanna lived in the Grossdotty house. The Fishers' house was a double one, 2 houses joined together. Grossdotty, who was dead now, had built his house first. Then, when he got too old to farm, he joined another house on, for his youngest son Rufus. That was SHOO-FLY's father, whom the children called Dat. Aunt Susanna was Dat's sister, and little Susanna, or SHOO-FLY, had been named for her. Aunt Susanna and Grossmama lived together now in the Grossdotty house. SHOO-FLY ran around the corner and in at the door, but the big kitchen was empty. Where was Grossmama? There was her rocking chair beside the window, with the ferns and potted plants. There was her sewing basket, her thimble and scissors. The fire was burning in the range, and something was cooking in the big pot. The kettle was singing comfortably. The room was quiet, peaceful, still. Only the big clock on the high shelf made a noise, ticking steadily. Then it growled and struck the hour, a lonely sound. SHOO-FLY's heart sank, and tears came to her eyes. Where was Grossmama? She wanted to be a little girl again, to sit on Grossmama's lap and feel her warm arms around her. She wanted to talk things over, but the house was empty. She called up the stairway. No one answered. Grossmama was gone. Then SHOO-FLY remembered. She had seen Sonny Boy and the buggy go out the lane as she drove in with Miss Ferguson. Grossmama went riding in her buggy whenever she wanted to. She never told where she was going. Maybe she went to see Great Grossmama or Uncle John, or the doctor, or to the store. Maybe she just went to pick up Aunt Susanna at the gift shop where she worked. Grossmama would be back soon. She had to get back before sundown. She had no lamps on her buggy. She always stayed home after dark, so SHOO-FLY waited. She sat on the couch and waited in the gathering darkness. She ate her pretzels one by one. Then at last Grossmama came. In she came, little sprightly, brisk Grossmama, as chipper as a grasshopper. She took off her bonnet and shawl and hung them up. Then in came the twins, Pumpkin and Puddin', prancing and capering. The twins squealing and giggling. The twins chattering their heads off. Aunt Susanna came in too. Nobody noticed SHOO-FLY curled up on the couch, or if they saw her, they ignored her. Grossmama started supper, while Aunt Susanna pumped up the gas lamp and lighted it. Then she hung it over the table. The twins were going to stay for supper. The twins had brought their nightgowns with them. They were going to stay all night at Grossmama's. The twins were spoiled rotten, Ma'am always said. Grossmama put wood on the fire, stirred the pot with a big spoon, then sat down in her rocker and took the twins on her lap. Big 7-year-old girls, 2 of them on her lap at once. She rocked them back and forth. She began to sing to them. "Ah, bazaar, Da Kotz loft im Schna, der Schna got avash, de Kotz loft in Drak. ABC, the cat walks in the snow goes away, and the cat walks in the mud, jumps over the stump with a bag full of rags, jumps over the barn with a bag full of fire. It was too much. SHOO-FLY couldn't stand it. She got up and started for the door. "Where are you going, Susie?" called Grossmama, looking up. But it was too late now. SHOO-FLY did not answer. She went out and banged the door behind her. SHOO-FLY did not get the threatened licking, nor did she ride in the Fergusons' car again. The next day at school her life was miserable. The children teased her and never let up. "Susanna's trying to be English," they cried. She met every taunt with "Och, be still," but that did not help much. Her only comfort was in her library book. That day she almost ran home from school. She couldn't wait to read more about Rebecca. At home the first thing she saw was that the yard was spotless. The geese were all gone, all in the goose run, and the walks had been scrubbed clean. There were 3 Amish buggies in the barnyard. That meant company. Before she went in, she took her crow out of his pen and turned him loose. He flew to a treetop, and when she called him, he flew down and landed on her shoulder. He sat on her finger and ate corn out of her hand, but he would not let the twins hold him at all. He pecked at them instead. Before she put him back in his pen, she decided to name him Jackie. She went in the kettle house, opened the kitchen door, and took a peek. It was a quilting. Ma'am had her newest quilt on the frame and in the front room. All 7 aunts must be in there quilting. They were all talking at once. It sounded like birds making noises in a tree. The kitchen was big as 2 average kitchens. It never looked bigger than now. It was filled with children. All the aunts had children, mostly babies, cousins. 2 SHOO-FLY babies meant bottles to be filled and diapers to be changed. She knew all about that. They were all crying and whining and fussing. She stepped over their heads, slid past the door opening into the front room, and headed for the stairs. There was only one thing to do: disappear. Hide where nobody would find her. How wonderful to have the library book. It was a good chance to read. The aunts must have been there for dinner. She glanced at the sink in passing. Why stay around when all those stacks and mounds of dishes were waiting? They hadn't even washed their own dishes, or swept the floor after eating. Could it be they expected certain girls to come home from school and do it? Let them do it themselves. And if they stayed for supper, let them carry in their own wood, cook their food, and wash dishes again. SHOO-FLY crept quietly up the stairs. She found her book and began to read. She changed to her old clothes as slowly as she could, reading as fast as she could. She was living with a non-Amish Rebecca on a non-Amish farm. Oh, it was wonderful. This book, Rebecca rode on a stage, not in a buggy. Suddenly a voice broke into her dream. "Susanna, Susanna." It was Ma'am's voice calling. "Susanna, run down cellar and bring me a big jar of chow-chow." SHOO-FLY had to think quickly. They'd find her up here in the bedroom, that's for sure. Beck and Bib would soon be home and come up here to change clothes. They could help Ma'am. It was time to disappear, but how? Where? SHOO-FLY had a number of favorite hiding places, but how to get to them? Then an idea hit her. Clutching her book under her arm, she crept into the boys' bedroom. It was dark and spooky. Ma'am always kept the shades pulled. She stumbled and fell over Big Boy's shoes, left in the middle of the floor, then got up. She saw a flashlight of Jonas' washstand and decided to borrow it. The window over the 1-story kettle house could be opened. She could jump down on the lower roof and then from there to the ground. No sooner said than done. Lucky she was a good jumper. She had had plenty of practice in the barn. taking dares from Jonas and Reuben. But in the barn there was hay to land on, not hard ground barely covered with grass. The geese had nibbled it bare. She came down with a thump and frightened the geese. They all began to gobble. "Be quiet, you noisy things." Her book fell, then the flashlight. "Och, did I break it?" She picked them up and ran. She must get out of the goose run before anybody saw her. Pretzel chased her and began to bark. Where to go, which hidey hole would be best? Being the middle child in a family of 9, SHOO-FLY had problems. Her 2 big sisters and 2 big brothers thought she was too little to do what they did. Her 2 little sisters and 2 little brothers thought she was too big. She often found it hard to survive in a world all her own, smack in the middle. The hidey holes were a big help. Which should it be? Where should she go? She had to think fast before she got caught. Over to Gross Mama's. No, not after last night. Behind the egg crates in the chicken house. No, it was too lousy there. Up in the hay-mow. The barn was full of tobacco now and smelled awful. Up in the cherry tree. They might see her there. How about the family buggy? Not Gross Mama's, but Mam's. It was in the barn. Mam would not be going anywhere as long as the ants were there. No sooner said than done. SHOO-FLY slipped in the side door of the barn and climbed into the buggy. Lucky she brought the flashlight along. It wasn't broken at all. Then she heard a noise, a squeaky noise, a whiny noise. Was it a cat meowing? She flashed her light on the buggy floor. "Jeepers, look there," she cried. "It's Becky Green-Eyes, and she's got kittens." There, in a nice soft nest on the old horse blanket, was Beck's cat, that Jonas had named, with 5 baby kittens. They were squirming and mewing. Their eyes weren't open yet. She'd tell Beck so she could feed them, but not now, later on. They wouldn't bother her. She shoved them over out of the way. She curled up on the floor and pillowed her head on the seat cushion. It was dark and spooky, but homelike and cozy. She flashed the light on. She could read comfortably. No one would find her. She entered another world. The book Rebecca liked to read books too, dozens of books that SHOO-FLY had never even heard of. She had problems too. She was one of a big family. She had aunts, only 2 though, one pleasant and one unpleasant. It was the crow cawing loudly that brought SHOO-FLY back to life. Jonas had been sent to find her. He thought of a quick way to locate her. He let the crow out of its pen and began to chase and tease it. The crow protested noisily, and his angry caws brought SHOO-FLY running. Pretzel was jumping and barking madly. "Where have you been?" cried Pumpkin. "We hunted everywhere for you," said Puddin'. SHOO-FLY put the crow back in his pen. The buggies and the ants and the babies were all gone now. She hadn't even heard them go. Somebody had cooked supper. The family was waiting. They couldn't pray without her. She rushed to her seat on the bench, bowed her head, and closed her eyes. Her heart was beating fast under her black apron. "Oh God," she prayed, "don't let them ask me any questions."